Lighting. One of the biggest visuals to your game. It's bound to be an important spectacle, and for a game like SCP Secret Laboratory, that's no different. While SCP Secret Laboratory's current lighting in most cases is fine, in some it leaves more to be desired, where previous versions outdid the quality of the current one. In other places, the lighting just outright doesn't work. With lighting being such an important part of the game, as it is a pretty big visual, let's dissect some of the problems with the current lighting and ways it can be changed. Maps and visual designs of your game help build an atmosphere, something which is essential to most games. In the case of horror games, you'll usually see designs that delineate environmental factors and really bring out lighting, not only to create an unnerving atmosphere, although a big reason, but to also create something that makes everything overall pop out more. Compare this to other games, usually not of the horror genre and of the FPS genre, and they have lighting everywhere and a dull color scheme that helps the background blend together and not take away from the gameplay. As a result, maps tend to be repetitive blur, which doesn't take much attention away from the player and their gameplay, but that's exactly the goal. In the case of SCP-SL, a game that labels itself as a horror game and does things that would make you think it is a horror game, it has lighting that goes unnoticed. It causes the rooms to be a repetitive blur that all blends together into each other. Heavy containment zone. The zone that is supposed to house the most terrifying and deadly of creatures is a bright yellow, not helping to create a scary atmosphere. I actually think this is where SCP Secret Laboratory's lighting is at its weakest, because it just doesn't fit the game or what it's set out to be, being a facility currently undergoing a containment breach of various terrifying creatures that have had to be hidden away from society. This would paint a pretty scary picture in your head of a dark facility with flashing lights and people being slaughtered left, right, and center. But no. This couldn't be further from the case. This place is better lit than Poppy Playtime's Co., leaving no corners devoid of light and no room for imagination. These visuals are much more appealing to an FPS game than a horror game, which, while might not be the intent, is just what it is. Everything is presented to you, leaving nothing standing out, and everything blending into each other. This contrasts to older versions of a lighting and heavy containment zone. Older versions were actually dark and unnerving, and popped out to help build an atmosphere that took attention away from the game to help scare you. It helped contribute to make things scary, especially when contrasting to the current lighting, which does no favor in such. While the current versions help you see, the old one was honestly fine, and quite frankly would be overall better in many places, in many people's opinions, considering how much more it helps contribute to the scary atmosphere of the game. The older versions of SCP-SL had cracks in the walls, making it look more scary and eerie, which, while might not be realistic, still made the place look run down and give that eerie feeling. The lighting just also helped things pop out, and in some cases, actually looked beautiful. The lights bloomed and seeped through things like the light was tangible, making the map actually a cool sight to see, compared to now where, yeah, not so much. Lights are stagnant and prominent everywhere, leaving no room for a visual effect of blooming, quite frankly a downgrade in most people's books. They also took some places that look beautiful, where light was tangible and bled through objects, changing it to just be what can be agreed upon as ultimately worse and less stunning. Basically, the game took a room like this and turned it into this. It made this into this and this into this. Of course, the second of these lets you see better, but the first image looks darker and scarier, as well as just popping out more overall due to the contrast. It lets everything pop out, leaving some room for dread, and wondering what's ahead. The old lighting and textures just made everything more visually appealing, compared to now where everything is just a repetitive blur of textures that isn't eye-catching at its best and an atmosphere killer at its worst. Oh boy. This, and this are huge problems. These are huge chunks of the map that just allow somebody to completely conceal themselves. The biggest problems are its placement and size, being near a place where a specific type of class needs to go in order to win, and being such a huge part of the map that is concealed. This allows for easy and kind of encouraged camping, giving one person a huge advantage. This is a pretty big problem and gives people unfair advantages, especially when you consider another factor of the game, the toggleable facility lights. If you turn your facility lights off, this gives a big competitive advantage, not only solving this issue that there's a big part of the map concealed by darkness, but it also gives you an advantage practically everywhere else in the map that has some sort of darkness, at the cost of good visuals. The problem begins when it's a game all about killing your opponent before they kill you. This causes players to have this choice between good visuals or an advantage of being able to see people in any condition regardless of lighting, which I hope you can see why that's a problem. Everyone who is willing to throw out these visuals for this advantage will, and it's kind of scummy to force a player to have to sacrifice just wanting to see the game in proper lighting in order to have an equal chance against other players who abuse this. While this is mostly prominent on surface and doesn't give you as big as an advantage in the facility, with future updates possibly making the facility darker, it's going to be used more in the facility, so my point still stands. These huge spots of darkness need to be changed, as the lighting on surface lets people camp people who need to escape, which is pretty hugely unfair. I also just think toggleable facility lights is a weird setting to have, as turning them off gives you such an advantage in a game all about having advantages against opponents. Is that just me? There's definitely counter arguments I've heard to wanting a different, more eye-catching and darker lighting, such as turning your brightness down to a darker setting, even though this doesn't even begin to dive into the problem that people just liked the old eye-catching lighting. Not only does turning your brightness down not even affect brightness, but contrast, but having a darker brightness leaves you at a disadvantage, as it creates huge blind spots. Turning down your brightness just is asking to be worse at the game and be an easier target. Another counter argument I've received is that old lighting in SPSL just made everything harder to see without serving any other purpose. I could see why people think this, as the current version of lighting is just so devoid of darkness, it's definitely, by a long shot, more visible than older versions. But the older versions really weren't that hard to see. They also helped build the atmosphere, or at the very least, not kill it, compared to now where it's just not as scary encountering things with such a bright and continuous lighting. Just imagine any horror game you've played, but reimagine there was never any darkness and everything was always brightly lit, and you can probably see how bright, continuous lighting helps things be less scary. Lastly, I know I'll always get somebody saying, "This isn't what you really want," because Northwood and its community know what you like and don't like better than you do. Yes, I want this. Yes, other people want this. Just because the old SCPSL was worse overall and had less polish doesn't mean there weren't good things to it, and it didn't have better aspects to it than the current SPSL. I spent hours not only watching old SCPSL, but playing old SCPSL. And while I agree that in some areas old lighting wasn't the best, and current lighting definitely outweighed those older versions, in some areas old lighting was definitely better than what we have currently, or at least more eye-catching and visually appealing. If I haven't sold you with the images cycling in the background throughout the entire video, showing various images of examples of the lighting I have been asking to bring back, well, damn. But that's fine. And at the end of the day, that just settles down to a disagreement between people, which isn't something that can be changed. And instead of trying to make people doubt their own thoughts, perhaps we can provide a solution that is a median of both things. Speaking of solutions, how can we fix this? Well, the obvious and easy answer is to just combine some lighting from older versions with lighting from newer versions and mash it together to get the best of both worlds. A sort of median to accommodate for the people of the community who want these different things. Heavy is dark and actually contributes to the atmosphere. Walls are worn and give off an unnerving feeling. The lighting and light is pretty generous, but still has a looming dread. The lighting and entrance has a little bit more of a deteriorated feel, and you can actually see people on surface. Turning your brightness down actually affects the brightness of the game instead of solely contrast, and lit less harshly leaves you at a disadvantage. And most importantly of all, lighting is tangible and bleeds through and around objects. Or you could do what I would love to see, which is just have some new level design that will give bigger opportunities to have cool lighting. Add more opportunities to show off blooms or lights bleeding into a room, creating a big contrast of darkness and light. Really, if you want any inspiration or examples, you can just search them up. This entire video has just been a slideshow of images that showcase this lighting I've been talking about. If you can make the lighting look like this, where it bleeds through things and the light looks tangible, rather than just a continuous light everywhere that's stagnant, it makes the game look beautiful and far more eye-catching than what we have currently. Oh, what's that? I was too slow on production of this video, and Northwood has already made a teaser of a lighting change in Heavy. I'm very glad Northwood is changing this. Like I previously said, Heavy is where I found Northwood's lighting to be the weakest, as it just fails to encapsulate the intensity of the situation at hand, being a facility undergoing a current containment breach. I still think this video is a nice talking point to not only show some people that old lighting had its perks. It's crazy how many people in the official Discord server get so butthurt when you say you like anything from old SCPSL. But to also avoid Northwood taking this good-looking new Heavy and botching it in some way, there is a beauty to old lighting, and it can be expanded upon with aspects of current lighting to make something that's ultimately better than both. In the end, I think both lightings have their weaknesses and strengths, and everybody should be able to look at the newer lighting and at the older lighting in SCPSL and realize both have their charm. Both have areas where they shine, and both have areas where, well, it could be better. The new version isn't inherently bad, but a lot of people's dislikes come from thinking the older version was better and was more eye-catching and appealing. The newer version of lighting has places where it outweighs the older lighting, and in other areas, it's the opposite. It's not really a hard concept to grasp that it is possible that there can be a median between these two, the best of both worlds, and that median better have tangible lighting. I think there is huge potential for better lighting in this game that can be accomplished. I think right now, many improvements can be made. I hope this video helps underline the problems that many people, including myself, see with lighting in this game. That's all, and have a great rest of your day.